Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. An Israeli airstrike strikes the coastal city of Tyre in Lebanon, killing at least one person. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salah says his country is at risk of being thrown into a new war, as dozens of airstrikes kill at least 5 others. An Israeli airstrike has killed a top Hamas political leader in Gaza. Locals say the airstrike killed Salah al-Bardawil and his wife and another party official. The mayor of Istanbul appears in court for the first time since his arrest on corruption and terrorism charges. This comes as protests in favour of the mayor sweep cities throughout Turkey. Iran has unveiled new strategically placed missile systems on the Gulf Islands. Iran's Revolutionary Guards say that the new equipment can target enemy bases, vessels and assets. Houthi media in Yemen accuses the United States of attacking an airport in Houdeiyah. The Houthis blame American aggression and said that the attacks have targeted the airport on the Red Sea coast. The Israeli opposition leader calls for a general strike if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to obey a Supreme Court decision freezing the government's dismissal of the security chief. This comes as thousands of Israelis protest the dismissal of the Shin Bet leader. In Sudan, at least 45 people have been killed in a paramilitary attack in North Darfur. Fighting erupted in April of 2023 and has been marked with ongoing atrocities and countless civilian casualties ever since. At least 4 personnel were killed in Balochistan, Pakistan, according to district officials. Unidentified armed assailants opened fire on a police patrolling van, killing 4 personnel. Hamas has launched a new wave of airstrikes across Gaza, targeting senior Hamas officials. One strike in Khan Yunis killed Hamas political leader Salah al-Bardawil and his wife, according to Hamas officials. Hamas has condemned the strike as an assassination. The group claims Bardawil was praying when an Israeli missile hit his tent shelter. Israel has not yet commented on his death. The attack comes amid growing pressure on Hamas. The Palestinian faction, Fatah, is urging the group to step aside, warning that its continued rule in Gaza could threaten the existence of Palestinians in the territory. A Hamas spokesperson says the group is open to discussions on governing Gaza, but insists it has no ambition to rule. Israel is facing growing political tension as opposition leader Yair Lapid has called for a general strike if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to obey a Supreme Court order. The court order has blocked the Netanyahu government's decision to dismiss the Shin Bet chief Ronen Bar, a move that has sparked 3 days of protests. Thousands have gathered in Tel Aviv, waving Israeli flags and demanding Netanyahu reverse his decision to dismiss the internal security chief. Protesters are accusing Netanyahu of undermining democracy and endangering national security. Some say his government is trying to control the country's security agencies for political gain. Netanyahu has defended his decision, saying only the government can choose who leads Shin Bet. He insists Israel will remain a democracy despite the court's intervention. However, critics argue his actions are pushing the country into a constitutional crisis. Let's listen to what Netanyahu and Lapid had to say.
תחליט לא לציית לפסיקת בית המשפט, היא תהפוך את עצמה באותו יום, באותו רגע, לממשלה עבריינית. אם זה יקרה, באותו רגע המדינה כולה צריכה לעצור. לעצור. יש מערכת אחת שלא יכולה לעצור, זו מערכת הביטחון. אנחנו נגד כל סרבנות, אבל חוץ מזה, הכל. המשק צריך לשבות, הכנסת צריכה לשבות, בתי המשפט צריכים לשבות, הרשויות המקומיות צריכות לשבות, לא רק האוניברסיטאות, בתי הספר.
רונן בר לא יישאר ראש השב"כ, לא תהיה מלחמת אחים, וישראל תישאר מדינה דמוקרטית.
More from the Middle East now, where Israeli airstrikes and artillery fire pounded southern Lebanon, killing at least 8 people. This comes after Israel intercepted rockets launched from across the border. The attacks mark a sharp escalation in hostilities, threatening a fragile truce that ended last year's deadly war between Israel and Hezbollah. Lebanon's health ministry confirmed fatalities in Tyre, a coastal city hit in a second wave of Israeli strikes. Another attack in Quelle wounded 4. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam warned that Israel's military operations risk plunging Lebanon into a new war. Israel's military said it was targeting Hezbollah positions in response to ongoing rocket fire. Strikes were also reported in Zibquin, southeast of Tyre. Regional leaders are calling for urgent diplomatic intervention to prevent further escalation. We are joined by Professor Rohan Gunaratne, Middle East Affairs expert located in Singapore, for more on this discussion. Professor Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. I want to come first of all with this escalation. How do you think it's going to impact this already fragile situation between Lebanon and Israel?
The Lebanese government has stated that they still do not know who fired those rockets into Israel. The Lebanese Hezbollah itself has denied firing those rockets. But what is important to know is that 3 rockets were fired successfully into Israel, and the Israelis intercepted those rockets. 2 other rockets fell into Lebanese territory. Israel's strategy is deterrence. Israel has conducted 2 waves of attacks against southern Lebanon and eastern Lebanon and dismantled Lebanese Hezbollah infrastructure, their launch sites and their other capabilities. So as long as the Lebanese government does not dismantle the non-state armed groups, it could be Lebanese Hezbollah, it could be the Palestinian groups that are currently operating in Lebanon, Lebanon faces a risk of attack from Israel. What is important is for the new leadership of Lebanon to seize this opportunity of American assistance to rebuild the Lebanese military, to dismantle Hezbollah and other groups. If that can be done, Lebanon will be a safe country for Lebanese citizens and others who work and live in Lebanon to exist in Lebanon. Otherwise, IDF will attack. IDF strategy is one of overwhelming deterrence, and that's what we have seen in the last 24 hours.
Professor Gunaratne, despite Hezbollah's denial of involvement, what do you believe the Hezbollah was involved in these rocket attacks on northern Israel? Why or why not?
It is too difficult to say, because other than Lebanese Hezbollah, there are other Palestinian groups that have established bases in Lebanon. And what is important is for the Lebanese authorities to ensure that these groups no longer operates in Lebanon. To respond to your very specific question, whether it was the Hezbollah, we do not know as yet. But over time, we will know. I have looked at the site from where the firing took place. I have looked at the capabilities that were recovered, because that has been made public by the Lebanese government. It's very rudimentary capabilities. Does not look like Lebanese Hezbollah. But whatever it may be, Israel has attacked mostly Lebanese Hezbollah targets in Lebanon.
Professor Gunaratne, Israel has framed these strikes as a response to these attacks on Metula. Do you believe this retaliatory action is effective for the dynamics of Hezbollah and Israel in ensuring long-term security? Or do you think it does risk a further escalation?
Certainly it risks further escalation, but one must understand Israel is a very small country with a small population, and its strategy is always to establish deterrence, meaning if someone attacks Israel, Israel will apply overwhelming force and send a very clear message. Do not attack us. If you attack us, you have to endure our retaliation. And that is what Israel has done. Lebanese Hezbollah has also issued a statement saying that they haven't done it, but they have also justified that they must maintain their capabilities, because there's a move now within Lebanon where political leaders are saying that Hezbollah should dismantle and disarm, and the Lebanese military to take control of Lebanon. And I personally believe that there will be a ceasefire agreement, a permanent ceasefire agreement, a military agreement between Lebanon and Israel, because that is what the Americans want. So the Americans are now working behind the scenes to build that permanent agreement between Lebanon and Israel. But Israel will always demand that Lebanese Hezbollah be disarmed, and any Palestinian group that is in Lebanon, that they do not carry weapons and they do not maintain any military bases. This will be a demand on the part of Israel.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne, thank you very much for joining us. We now move to some more news updates. Venezuela has reached a deal with the United States to resume repatriation flights for migrants. President Nicolas Maduro announced that the flights will begin today. This comes amid growing tensions over the United States deporting Venezuelan migrants to El Salvador. Over 200 migrants were sent there last week, with Washington claiming they were gang members. Venezuela strongly denied this claim. Meanwhile, families of the deportees began protesting, demanding their loved ones be returned. Many say they were deceived into believing they were headed back to Venezuela. Maduro blamed Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele for their detention and urged his government to release them immediately. Meanwhile, a US judge has ordered for more information on the deportations of these migrants by March the 25th. Venezuela says it will hire a legal team to ensure that migrants return safely. Let's hear what the relatives of imprisoned people had to say.
No, Michael Antonio Olivera está detenido desde el 24 de octubre del año 2024, donde se encontraba laborando, y fue...
Michael es una persona sin expedientes policiales, una persona limpia, si no, no estuviese toda la comunidad que está ahorita en este momento aquí.
Ellos no tienen ellos no han cometido ningún delito en El Salvador. Entonces pedimos que sean devueltos de forma inmediata a su patria, todos aquí, a Venezuela. Que si es Venezuela quien tiene que sancionar a estos muchachos, porque son sus connacionales y los queremos aquí.
We are now joined by Dr. Veselin Ivanov-Popovsky, Professor and Vice Dean, Jindal Global Law School, located in New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to first start off with the law considerations of this. Obviously, these Venezuelan deportees there was a law enacted, a centuries-old law enacted to deport these people out of the USA, a law usually reserved for wartime. How does the use of this law fees up with international law considerations? And these guys didn't have a trial, a fair trial or a trial at all before being deported to El Salvador. What does this mean? How is the international community going to look at this?
Well, it's obviously shameful on the part of the Trump administration to invoke an irrelevant, as you said, it's 1798 law, which was meant to be for national sovereignty states. If a country invade another country, only in that sense. Obviously, 200 Venezuelans in the United States are not part of any armed force, not part of any aggression or incursion into the United States. And the American judges, including the federal judge, James Bosberg, clearly stated that the deportations are illegal. And it's really ironic. If a year ago somebody would have told me that the US president will violate human rights and the president of Venezuela, Maduro, will try to bring those people back and satisfy the family reunion, I would have never believed that. But this is the kind of the irony of history, where one state like United States can turn into populism, nationalism, even fascism. Those scenes really remind Mussolini and Hitler and deportations in 1920s and 1930s in Europe. But that's where we are. We have a president in total ignorance of domestic law and international law, taking actions against the prescription of his own judges in the United States, and even more than that, asking the Supreme Court to impeach the judge who ruled that those deportations are illegal, and
Yes.
the Supreme Court Judge John Roberts effectively denying that and saying, I cannot impeach James Bosberg.
I want to go, Dr. Popovsky, if you don't mind, I want to go into the methods into the ways that these migrants were shipped over to El Salvador. First of all, there are reports they're going in chains. There are reports they're being misled, believe that they're going back to their own country. Would you be able to talk a little bit about some of the things that these migrants are experiencing under the new Trump administration, and also explain to me a bit where they've gone? I mean, El Salvador was previously known for serious gang violence, but now it's home to these mega prisons. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Certainly. Well, it's a range of human rights violations. It's not only one. It's a long list of violations of human rights. Again, the time will show, and how judges will rule on all of those violations. People were deceived. They were told they are going back to Venezuela to reunify with their families. That was a lie. They were deported to El Salvador, as you said, to a very notorious gang prison. Their heads were shaved, they were mistreated. You know, the picture were really horrible. They remind concentration camps back in the 1930s. Families obviously protested in Venezuela. You showed the picture of family members being so angry with what happens to their family members. Again, it's really dire situation. Human rights are no longer respected. President Trump would like to look strong, but it's strong against the weak. He uses the migrants, people who have nothing to do apart from being
Yes.
victims of his rules. So that's how he looks strong against the weak.
What does this situation reveal about the current state of US and Venezuela relations, in particular with Donald Trump and the controversial leader that is Nicolas Maduro?
As I mentioned, it's really paradoxical to see Donald Trump violating human rights and President Maduro trying to accommodate the situation and negotiating the deportation back to Venezuela from El Salvador now, happy to bring those people back home. And President Trump absolutely denying any legal basis of any of his action. It's an irony. It's really a reverse what we would have expected to happen. By the way, migrants are very peaceful people. like against everybody says, or every nationalist in the world say migrants are a problem. They are not. Those people expect their papers from the immigration office. They don't want to do anything which is against the law. They don't want to deal with the police or any, even small crimes they wouldn't commit, simply because they want to settle in the place they want. And to name migrants to be criminal is, again, absolute lie. It has never been proven. In 1 of a million migrants may commit a crime. Mostly crimes are committed by the local people, by the natives, not by the migrants. Thank you.
Dr. Veselin Ivanov-Popovsky, thank you very much for joining us. We now move on. Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu appeared in court for questioning. Prosecutors grilled him over allegations of corruption and links to terrorism. His detention earlier this week sparked nationwide protests. Prosecutors are seeking his imprisonment along with 4 aides ahead of the trial. A court ruling on his detention is expected today. Meanwhile, thousands gathered outside Istanbul's municipal building in Saraçhane, defying a ban on street demonstrations. The restriction initially imposed in the city has now been extended until March the 26th. Demonstrations have spread to 55 of Turkey's 81 provinces. The unrest marks the country's largest street protests in more than a decade. Yesterday, riot police moved in on protesters at City Hall. Officers fired tear gas, forcing many to take shelter inside the building. According to media reports, multiple arrests were made, but official figures remain unclear. CHP leader Özgür Özel addressed the crowd, claiming over 500,000 protesters had gathered. Turkey's Journalists Union reports that many were beaten, shot with rubber bullets and had their equipment destroyed. Reporters Without Borders condemned the violence, calling it heavy-handed and completely arbitrary. The group is demanding accountability and punishment for those responsible.
Sokaklara çıkarak yanına sol örgütleri, marjinalleri, vandalları alarak milli iradeye parmak sallama dönemleri artık geride kalmıştır. Sokak terörü üzerinden siyasete ve adalete istikamet çizildiği günler eski Türkiye ile birlikte tamamen mazide kalmıştır.
Moving back to the Middle East, where Iran's Revolutionary Guards have stationed new missile systems on Greater Tumb, Lesser Tumb and Abu Massa near the Strait of Hormuz, capable of targeting enemy bases, vessels and assets within 600 kilometers. The deployment follows recent military drills and coincides with Iran's pending response to a letter from US President Donald Trump, urging nuclear talks while warning of military action. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei dismissed US threats, vowing retaliation against any hostility. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi viewed Trump's letter as more of a danger, but acknowledged potential opportunities. The US maintains its goal of building trust with Tehran. Iran has controlled the disputed islands since 1971, despite long-standing UAE claims. Here's what Commander Ali Raza Tagsiri had to say.
و دارایی‌های دشمن در منطقه را ما قادر هستیم که اینها را مورد هجوم واقع بدیم.
A ballistic missile launched from Yemen, apparently aimed at Israel, fell short in Saudi Arabia, according to a defense source. The missile was identified, but sirens were not activated as it did not pose a direct threat to Israel. Meanwhile, Houthi militant media accused the United States of launching airstrikes on Hodeidah airport, calling it American aggression. This follows a series of US operations targeting the Iran-backed rebels, with President Donald Trump vowing to annihilate them. The US Central Command confirmed continuous operations against the Houthis, describing them as necessary to curb the group's regional threats. The airstrikes, the first since Trump resumed office, came amid growing tensions in the Red Sea, where Houthi forces repeatedly targeted commercial and military vessels. US officials say further strikes remain on the table if the group continues its attacks. Over to Africa now, where a Sudanese pro-democracy activist says at least 45 people have died in western Darfur. The Resistance Committee's report says the Rapid Support Forces launched attacks in the city of al-Mahalia over the last 2 days. A partial casualty list confirms that at least a dozen women are among the dead. The paramilitary group claims it seized al-Mahalia. The city is a key desert location near the borders of Chad and Libya. Sudan's military acknowledges fighting in the area but has not confirmed losing control of the city. Al-Mahalia lies about 200 kilometers north of El Fasher. The military still holds El Fasher despite near-daily RSF strikes. M23 rebels vow to withdraw from Waikali, citing peace efforts, but Congo's army remains doubtful. The move follows M23's last-minute pullout from the planned talks with Congo's government due to the EU sanctions on its leaders. While Congo urges action, officials suspect the rebels are advancing towards Mubi after supply routes were cut. M23's westward push has brought them within 400 kilometers of Kisangani. The conflict, fueled by Rwanda's 1994 genocide and mineral disputes, has defied ceasefires. Congo accuses Rwanda of aiding M23, but Kigali denies involvement, claiming self-defense. M23 insists on direct talks with Kinshasa. Over to South Asia now, where 4 labourers were shot dead by unknown assailants in Kalat Manchochar city, while 1 survived. The victims, bore-well drillers from Sadiqbad, were taken to a health centre with an FIR pending. In Noshki, gunmen on a motorcycle opened fire on a police patrol, killing 4 officers. Authorities, including President Asif Ali Zardari and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, condemned the attacks and vowed action against terrorism. Balochistan has faced reoccurring attacks targeting labourers, mainly from Punjab, with similar incidents in Barkan, Noshki, Kher and Gardwa. Ethnic-based killings have continued for years, with major attacks in 2019 and 2015. Security concerns remain high following recent train hijackings and targeted killings in the region. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.